Hello, Gary Parker here again, and this is SVG Part 2, and I am anxious to get some more work done here, and I hope you are too. Have some fun with me. Let's get moving. All right, so we got the home page here, linked in YouTube, and we get started with a little about what SVG meant. The Mozilla developer introduction is a good one. I'm going to probably come back to that in a moment. And we looked at a photo versus a graphic. We looked at a few examples of SVG out in the world and stuff I use in my line of work. And then we took a look at the SVG coordinate system. Something I didn't point out here, which I'm going to in this particular segment, we're going to look at some of the basic shapes, not all of them. So in this CodePen exercise, if you're not in the layout, the side layout view, this is my preference. And then we will maximize the HTML editor. And we can move that over a little bit. So it's a nice place to play. And if you sign up and log in, then you can save and fork the work. So for example, if you sign in here, you can then fork this one and get a copy of your own to play with, and CodePen will remember stuff you've done. So I highly recommend that. So you can come back and pick up where you left off. We changed this circle attribute element here to be a little point on the screen. Some other things here, and let's blow this up a touch. The stuff above is the boilerplate to get a grid in the background just for educational purposes. We have a rectangle that's being drawn here, and 0, 0 is actually up here. 25, 25, right there. 25, 25 would be the start of this pink rectangle. Notice the stroke is pink and the fill is lime green, and they chose a stroke of 4. Default stroke is 1. We played with the circle. They also have a polyline here, and that is this red line coming around. And a polyline is just a bunch of line segments. In SVG, commas and spaces are interchangeable. So these commas are in here for my benefit because I view a comma-separated pair as a point. So this is one point, space, here's another point, space, here's another point, and so on. And I like the polyline's a nice way to go. We also have the line, which just draws a single line segment, which we could also do with polyline, 2 points, going from x1, y1 to x2, y2. And like before, we have stroke width. We also have, I guess these don't have fill because they aren't closed shapes. There's a version of polyline called polygon that automatically jumps from the last point to the first point, closing the shape. So if I were to change this to polygon, then it will try to close itself there, and I could add a fill to it. Even without, let's see, a line can't be filled, but a polyline could be. And it would try to fill the, what it contains there. So if we did like a fill white, it'll throw that in there. And it looks like the fills have some transparency set to them. Yes, up here in the G. A G element is a group of stuff. So basically it puts a bit of transparency, means it's 80% opaque to 20% see-through every single object in this region. So a lot of times groupings of objects, there's a lot of good reasons for that. Anyway, let's try something else. So we're going to jump to the next slide. And I have 2 different tutorials here. I link back to the Mozilla tutorial just because here I grabbed their code for those basic shapes. They did a nice job with that. Their code here I put into my CodePen. I modified it just a little bit. Notice they don't do the comma separated. They just have everything's point separated. And then you just have to realize that every pair, even pair, is a point. I like to put commas in between to make it more obvious when I look back at it. Otherwise, this is just a string of numbers and it's hard to pick out where you are. So I did a little bit of editing on that. Let's see, they talk about here the rectangle and the different attributes of rectangle, circle, different attributes of circle. There's an ellipse, which gives us a 2 radii to play with instead of a circle. It has 1 line, polyline, polygon. I'll talk about path in the next video, but not this one, because there's a lot of different path attributes you can play with, and that exceeds even one short video. So let's jump into this particular code pen. And if you're not already in the side view, remember you can change your view from the default to either left or right orientation. I like the left. Since there's no CSS or JavaScript here, we will maximize the editor. And here, I ask you to change some of the attributes in the SVG element. So here we have our HTML panel on the side. And I have an H1 element here and an H3, and then here's the SVG embedded within the HTML. And so SVG can either be a standalone file or it can be an element inside of HTML. And as usual, I believe that you should set the width, you should set the height, you should set the view box, and then you should have the XML namespace. The version, that's not really needed anymore. The browser defaults to the latest version of SVG. So here we have a rectangle followed by a rectangle with some rounded corners. So notice the radius X, radius Y, so that rounds those corners, followed by a circle here, and then an ellipse, and then a line, a polyline, which gives us that nice lightning bolt, a polygon, which goes from the last point back to the first. And it looks like I did not edit these. I thought I did. So my preference would be to put commas to denote the pairs of points to make it more human readable. The browser does not care. And it's just being a little jittery because when I delete the space, it thinks that's one big number. So sorry for not doing that earlier. And same thing with the polygon. Every pair sequence here is a point. So those should have commas. Resave that for y'all. All right, so let me see, what else do we have? That's still part of the polygon. And then we have a path at the end, which I'm going to talk about next time. And this path has a Q, and a Q is a cubic Bezier curve, which I'll talk about in the next video. Those are fascinating. Oh my gosh, I could spend hours just on Bezier curves. So here, let's see, we want to make the rectangle not square, change its stroke from black to this hexadecimal color. When you do hexadecimal colors, you can't just type in the red, green, and blue digit pairs. You have to put a little hashtag in front to indicate it's a hex value. So let's find that first rectangle here. Let's say I want it to be not square. So I could either change the X or change the Y or both. I'm going to make it twice as tall, which will then jump down into the next figure. Oops, no, Y is its beginning corner, sorry. Width and height is what I want to play with. All right, let's make it 60. There we go. And let's change, what else should we do? Change the stroke. Okay, so I'm going to delete that. And I want to do a hashtag FFA500. Sometimes different systems are case sensitive. SVG is and it isn't. It turns out certain elements are case sensitive and certain attributes are case sensitive. Hexadecimal values are not case sensitive, so capital or lowercase there is okay. But there are some other attributes that are case sensitive, and you have to pay attention to that. Otherwise, it doesn't do what you tell it to do. And why didn't it change that? Oh, I don't need the semicolon. That's a CSS thing. There it goes. All right, so I changed it to an orange like the others. If you want to play more with hexadecimal colors, then you can just type, hexadecimal colors, hexadecimal color. And there's all kinds of things out there to play with it. Color hex, I think I've used before. It's kind of nice. They have a bunch of user favorites. And then I think if I just type like hex color, Google gives me this hexadecimal color picker where I can go through the rainbow of colors here and then choose a shade of that color. And then I can just grab their hex code here, copy, and paste it into whatever I'm messing with. So, and I get a new color. Cool. So play around with these basic shapes. If you want to get bold and play around with that path with the D attribute denoting the path it's supposed to take. M means move, Q means cubic Bezier. Cubic Bezier has a couple of fixed points and a couple of control points. And again, I'll talk about that later. All right, let's get a little more bold, shall we? Oh, yeah, this page. We didn't do this CodePen exercise. So these are attribute pieces, one version of them anyway, that I use with my math for elementary school teachers. I had fun programming this particular one. If you click on it, it will open it up as its own SVG thingy. And let me move my zoom tools so I can get up here. You notice the address at the top says .svg. So we're actually looking at an SVG file in the browser. And if we go and look at the page source, I've got some relatively more advanced versions of SVG where at the top I define a path for an equilateral triangle, a path for a square, and a path for a circle. And then I just reuse them later, moving them around the page. So I don't have to keep typing all this stuff over. You can reuse things you defined earlier in your SVG. I will probably do a later talk on that, but that'd probably be a few talks from now. Out of there, and back to the CodePen exercise. So this one here, I made a little sketch on a piece of paper, and then I tried to implement my sketch in SVG. So this was just a little pencil sketch I did, and this time I did include some CSS and JavaScript in case you wanted to see how you can grab an SVG element on the screen and do stuff to it. So just like you can, use JavaScript to mess with CSS and HTML stuff, you can mess with anything on the page, including images that are embedded. And so here I have an embedded SVG in my HTML, like the previous examples. And I have a couple of, at least one note explaining what I'm doing here. So the path below, so I am jumping into paths. I could have used a polygon to make the triangle, but I chose to use a path instead. I don't know why, I just like paths. The Z tag here, what do you call that? The Z identifier, it returns to the starting point of the whole path, which would be the 50.5010 there. So let's make a sketch on a piece of paper. So I'm going to bring up my digital paper here. If you have a piece of paper, get it out. Sorry, I didn't tell you ahead of time. You should have one. I would recommend sketching some coordinates because we're going to try and take our sketch, coordinatize it, and figure out how to make SVG version of it. And I'm just going to stick with simple shapes here. Let's see. So I'm just going to go super basic. Let's try and center at 50-50. And so I just kind of randomly said I want to go from 0 to 100, 0 to 100. You can do stuff in anywhere in the plane you want. So you could do all your drawing up here with negative x's and negative y's, or positive x's and negative y's. You can put your stuff anywhere you want. You just have to tell the SVG what part of the huge infinite plane to display. So let's say we center there, and then maybe I'll go up a radius of 30, say. So 10, 20, 30 roughly there, 30 roughly here, and then 10, 20, 30 would be about down there. So here's my rough circle. Boy, that's not a very good circle. Let's try that again, Gary. Sometimes my digital tablet gives me the fits. All right, that's a little better. Maybe the direction mattered. I appear to be a clockwise circle drawer, a little bit better. So there's my circle, and then maybe I'll throw in a square inside of it. So I'll try to do that right there. And I guess we could throw a triangle in for fun. So maybe I'll drop a triangle in the middle here. And so now I just kind of need to identify some points. So I was, for my circle, I was thinking it has a center of 50-50. And I gave it a radius of 30, and then we'll have to pick some stroke and fill properties to it. And then a square is a rectangle. And I need to identify where to start. So I don't know, it looks like I started this one at 30-30. So start 30-30, and then how wide do you think I made it? Did I go out to 70 there maybe? Yeah, it looks like about 70. So it looks like I have a width of 40, and we'll make the height 40 also. And then the triangle, I need to identify some points. So let's say we pick a nice easy point there, which would be what? 35 for x, 40. So for the triangle, I have 35, 40, no, 35, 60, sorry. And what's this one over here going to be? That's going to be 65. Oh, come on, my pen usually works better. Could be y'all make me nervous. 60 again for the heights, and then this point up here, let's say that's 50 and then 35. And I could either use a path for that, or I could use a polygon to make that happen. And let's see, I should have written that down somewhere else. Boy, good planning, Gary. 50, 50, 30. So I hope you're doing your drawing. Pause me at any time. And then 35, 60, 65, 60, and 50, 35. All right. Let's do it. So out of the whiteboard and into the design. So you could just play with the stuff I have here. So what do I have set up? I have SVG tag, XML namespace, that should stay. The version 1.1 can stay. My view box is starts at 0, 0, is 100 wide and 100 tall, which was what I was doing there. And I also said to display it 100 by 100. But then later, I tell JavaScript to go in, you blow up, please, come on, and double the size of it to 200 by 200. Okay, so I just a little finagling with JavaScript. If that is driving you nuts, then you just get rid of it. And once that's gone, it should shrink down. So I could have more easily, instead of telling the JavaScript to go and refit it after, I could have just said, hey, width and height here be 200. And notice weird stuff happens if the width and height don't match what the view box says. So that's, again, something else to discuss. So let's see, I did want a rectangle, and I wanted mine to start at 30, 30. So I can just go in and tweak the values here. And let's see, I wanted the width to be 40. And so you could go type these things by scratch. Now, sometimes I forget what attributes things have, and I'm constantly going back to places like Mozilla to remind myself what the format is. This one here. So I've got that set. All right, so then I also wanted a circle, and I had actually drawn my circle first. Does the order matter? Good question. The answer is yes, because they layer on top of each other. So the things that come in the beginning are at the bottom, and the things that come later are at the top. So if you've ever played with a graphics program in, say, Word, where you can move things up or down, put things in the back or bring things to the front, they're just changing their hierarchy in a list of elements here. So I'm going to cut that circle out there and paste it in here. And my circle is 50, 50, 30 is what I wanted. And we can tweak colors in a minute. And I might as well use this path here. I don't want the extra circle. And you want to be careful. Don't delete the ending SVG tag. That could mess things up. Tags are supposed to have a start and an end. And so the path has, noticed this slash greater than at the end. That is one way to enter a path. Another way would just be to put a closing path tag all on its own. So there's two legal ways to close one of these tags, slash greater than, or put a greater than, and then with a complete closing tag is the long form. So that's the long way. This is the short form of these tags. And my path was 3560. And so that says move to that point, M, and then L means, capital L means draw a line. There's a lowercase l, that means something else. I'll talk about that in the next one. This one was 6560. And then another line to 5035. And then Z says go back to where you came from. And what did I mess up here? Clearly I messed up something. Oh, it's a 25 over there. There should be a 35. And that looks a little bit more like what I drew. Let's see. Yeah, to the best of my artistic ability. All right, so, and then color stuff. You can play around with colors all you want. If you do a search for web colors or named colors, then you'll get to a website that lists the named colors that computers are familiar with, and there's a bunch of websites that do it. This Wikipedia page is a pretty good one. So they list the name of the color. Color names are not case sensitive. That's just for humans to read them. The hexadecimal version of the color, and then the decimal version of the color. And I'm not going to go into how to use the decimal version, but again, I showed the hexadecimal, or you could pick a color. So if you think dark salmon is a wicked cool color, then awesome, throw it in your picture. So maybe we want this, instead of dark slate gray, to be dark salmon. Can I spell salmon today? There, ooh, oh my gosh, that's painful. And then let's see, we got a black fill there. We could go no fill, fill none. Oops, don't hit enter, Gary. So then it just kind of is see-through. There's also a thing called fill opacity, which you can make it partially see-through. So maybe I could have done like line here, and then set the fill opacity to like 50%. So it's partially see-through. So then we get a little blend with the salmon in the background on that line, as opposed to a 1 there. Did I type that right? Yeah, see the difference? Okay, so that's just lime shining on its own, and then if I set the fill opacity to like 0.3 maybe, then it blends with the lime, with the salmon behind it, and we get some pukey color there. All right, so those are the basic shapes, or at least some of them. In the next video, I'll go over how the path works. And again, instead of path there, I could have done polygon. Spell it, polygon. And you can close it in 2 ways. That's the short form of the close. Polygon takes points, and then you would enter your points. You could just separate them by spaces, or separate them by commas, or separate them by commas and spaces. And there's no uniform style for that. The math person in me says do commas for the points, and then spaces in between the points. Don't throw parentheses in there, that will mess it up. 50, 35. And this one automatically will close itself. It looks like it has a default fill of black, so I could make that fill something else, like, oh, can I spell chartreuse? How do I spell it? Is that a color? Apparently not. Teal? How do I spell teal? There's teal, okay. And then I could do a stroke on that. And this is just sitting on top of the other triangle. So stroke orange. I like orange lately. Yeah, so, and then if I change the order, so basically this path and this polygon are the same shape, I just chose some different fills and colors. And if I change the order of them, right, then one will sit on top of the other. So if I control X that out of there and throw this one above it, then they get the trade. So now I have, oh, the fill none is making it look like the other one, but notice the yellow. Let's do a fill red on you maybe. See the difference in the two of them. So the order matters, the way you type things matters, and if playing with the code itself is painful and tedious to you, then in another couple episodes I will show how to use a program called Inkscape. So that's it for now. It was good to interact with you in this very strange virtual way. Hello and goodbye, future people. I'm out of here, literally.